All right. So the question was, how was Joseph able to stay faithful through it all?
Yeah.
And that's like one of the most like fascinating things with the story of Joseph to me is because if you think about like all the stuff that happened, because he started out as the favorite child with the jacket, and things just
he was
bad.
Slightly cocky though.
You think so?
His dream, I mean, you got to have a little wisdom with the audience you're presenting things to. You got to communicate it in the appropriate fashion. That would be the only critique I might have of him is he was a little bit cocky with his dream at the beginning.
Right, like maybe have a little bit of a chill with it. Yeah, like when you're telling your brothers about your dream.
Maybe add a little something into it to make sure that they're bowing down to him. That was, maybe a little too far.
I don't know. I have two brothers and I feel like
you want them to bow down to you.
It's very important that you establish dominance.
Dominance right from the beginning. I'm not going to say their actions were justified by that because you should never sell anyone into slavery.
Well, it went from
Matt,
kill
don't
first,
do that.
Right? They're like, how are we going to kill this guy? But
Matt's shaking his head right now. He disagrees. I don't know. No.
That's funny. But honestly, like things were great and they just went bad.
Yeah.
And things went good and then they went bad. And that's like the story of Joseph, why it's fascinating.
You're like, man, this guy can't catch a break.
He can't catch a break.
But it was all part of God's plan.
All part of God's plan. So that's why the big thing was like, he was able to look at God's perspective, like what was going to happen. And I think he understood that. That was able to help him stay faithful through all of that, which I'm like, man, I probably would have just like quit after being thrown into a well. So.
Yeah, like my life is starting to look pretty good. I'm stressing out about a lot of things, but when you look at it compared to Joseph's journey, he was the right person for the right time for what God had for them, and he remained faithful.
Through it all.
So we just got off the Samson. I said salmon again. Samson series, and like it's in contrast to Joseph's story.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling him.
Samson had opportunity to do right and be the deliverer.
Yeah,
but his character got in the way. Joseph had been given far less, but his character remained strong throughout.
Yeah.
And he was the deliverer that Samson never really was.
I mean, well, think about it. Like he was in Potiphar's house, like in charge of all his money and stuff.
Yeah.
You could have easily just like pocketing some of that money or kind of tried
and
to.
No one would have thought, like everyone would have been like, the dude deserves a break,
he
right?
was sold into slavery by his brothers.
Yeah.
And now so he's trying to figure his way out. But so he had a lot of those opportunities where he could have done wrong.
Yeah.
But stayed faithful to God. And because of that, God was with Joseph. So
yeah. Do you feel like you got enough time on Sunday to be able to like explain those kind of things? Yeah. That's how I feel. Like that would be like, I would love to just be able to talk about that aspect of it because I think that what you're talking about is so applicable in our lives of just saying, hey, I'm in a really tough situation. Like, I just want to I want to break from it. I want to give up for a second. But if we look at Joseph, he did something different, right?
Exactly.
He leaned into his difficulties.
He leaned into it. And that's probably the most difficult thing about when I chose Joseph and the hard time. Just like, this guy's got 13 chapters and I got 30 to 35 minutes.
Right.
But yeah, so there's a lot going on in that story.
Well,
but
good
he's
job.
able to stay faithful. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. We're off to a good start here. So how did God use these bad experiences in Joseph's life? How did he use those bad things for good in so many other people's lives?
Yeah. So it's kind of like talking about like what we just talked about.
Yeah.
I believe God was building a leader for a specific purpose because he had that purpose because he knew what he was needing Joseph for. So through all those trials and tribulations, it was building this character of a leader, a character of integrity. Because we said, he was there at Potiphar's house and he had to have integrity there. And he had the situation with Potiphar's wife.
Right.
And so to be moral, patience, 12 years in prison. Right. And you're sitting there thinking like, well, God, when's this going to happen? So I think through all of that, God was able to take all those bad experiences and say, hey, I am molding you to become the leader. Because the leader does need to be that. It needs to be patient, needs to be humble. Needs to be forgiving, needs to be able to look at someone who sold you into slavery and say, hey, I'm going to take care of you now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wish I was that good of a leader. I want God to mold me. Like, maybe not that way.
Yeah.
Don't mold me that way.
Right.
But yeah.
And I talk about that quite a bit in like the Bible study that I get to do on Thursdays online of like just God using bad situations in our life for good. Of like, I struggle personally with like stress and anxiety in my life, but I find that like talking about it and like trying to help other people have the same thing, like it also heals me too. So like something that's bad in my life that I wish I didn't have to deal with, if I can get through it, I can use that situation to help other people who might be struggling with the same things.
Yeah, to be able to use those things, how God brought you through it, and to say, hey, I dealt with that too. I still do deal with it, and here's what I do and what God's helped me through. And so I think that's exactly what he did with Joseph. He was just creating this leader through all of that, which and those times when we're like, those bad things are happening, it's hard to see that.
Right. And the difference between what Joseph did and what Samson did was Joseph saw those difficulties, those challenges as an opportunity for him to be faithful in God, and he trusted God.
Right.
Whereas we see in Samson, he didn't.
Right.
He sought out revenge and a grudge over what he should have been doing.
Yeah. Imagine just putting Samson in all those spots where Joseph is, and you see a different story.
Yes. Okay. Question number 3. Is there anything you didn't get to say on Sunday that you wish you would have said?
Yeah, so when I think about that, I think I kind of answered it up at the beginning.
Right.
It's like it's so difficult because I was like, I will only spend like 10 minutes going through the life of Joseph, and I only used like 3 scriptures because I was like, I got to paraphrase the rest of this, but there's so much that's happening. But like the one thing that I was like, I hate that I have to skim over this is his interaction with his brothers when his brothers came to Egypt.
Yeah.
And that interaction going back and forth and the forgiveness and everything. I'm like, I wish I could have stuck there more and the character of Joseph during that point.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying like rather than like skipping over that. But the thing is it didn't go well with what I was.
Right.
You know, it didn't make sense to spend a lot of time on that.
So I'm just curious, question along those lines. Why did that piece of it stick out to you?
Oh, that part?
Yeah, that part. Was there the reason I'm asking is that challenging to you? Is it something that you can relate to? Is it something that you think that other people could gain wisdom from? Why was that piece important to you?
Well, I kind of alluded a little bit in the sermon.
Yeah.
That, like when we understood that Joseph knew that this was for a greater purpose, is we can go back to that point of the story because the way he interacted with his brothers, you all of a sudden realize like, oh, Joseph had this mindset almost the entire time. Because when he said, hey, when you sold me, God sent me. And that just like blows my mind. That was his perspective.
It's a nice alliteration too.
Yeah. He doesn't say it like back to back. It's like 2 or 3 verses.
But I like the way you said it there.
Yeah.
It's like very pastoral of you.
You know, I got some good role models in my life, especially David Rudd's the greatest role model ever. I hope he watches this later. Does he? No, but you know, I just think that interaction shows that like who Joseph is as a person, because when you read the story of Joseph, it goes so fast that in my mind as a kid, I'm like, oh, this happened over like a couple months. Right. But it was like 12 years.
Yeah, a long period of time.
And now all of a sudden he's got his chance and he's like, no, that's not it at all. Because you would think that he'd have all this built up grudge.
He endured for a long time in a position that was not good.
Yeah. And
especially spending time in jail. Like you're like, man, he was in slavery. And then, oh, wow, he got put in this great position and he's got all these great leadership abilities. So he moved up quickly. Yeah. And then he gets accused of something that he didn't do.
And now in prison.
It
doesn't really say how long each one.
And then he's in charge of prison.
Yeah, he's in charge. It cracks me up. He's like, because the Lord was with Joseph, he was successful and put in charge of all the prisoners. I'm like, what does that even mean? Yeah. Like, was the jailer just not wanting to do his job? He's like, hey, Joseph, you got it.
It's kind of like, so I substitute teach. It's kind of like putting one of the
prison
students
is just like teaching.
I mean, in a lot of ways.
Well, what's funny is I think
a very planned day. They have to stay in their seats.
A couple of the students were trying to like make that discussion the other day of like, gotta use just like it.
I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, I'm not going to allude to that, but
I probably felt the same way when I was in school. Yeah. Honest, but now when I look back, I'm like, man, I wish that my only stress in life was going to school right now.
Yeah. I think it's the lack of choice for kids. They just can't really, they just are told what to do so much. Yeah. Which kind of leads us into possibly our next question